welcome. On behalf of Wellington Cinematic Media, I'd like to thank you for coming and spending a little bit of your afternoon with us. I'm Rae Haeberle, the marketing and business arm of this little venture, which means I'm the one who tries to bring this creative visionary you're about to meet back to Earth before his balloon flies too close to the sun. Regarding Tiberius, engrossing, annoyingly thought-provoking, an amazing read by a master storyteller, written in the traditions of Ben-Hur and Gates of Fire. Those aren't my words, but rather comments made by some of our reviewers on Amazon, for which we're very thankful. I was first introduced to Regarding Tiberius about a year ago, when a childhood friend of mine, Mary Hodges, said to me via Facebook message, "Hey, I know this guy named Bart. I've known him for a long time, and he's looking for some beta readers for his book. You like history? You should read it. It's epic." Bart never does anything halfway, she says. He either goes big or he goes home. Well, I had no idea who this Bart character was, and I'd certainly never heard of Regarding Tiberius. I was teaching 5 classes, lecturing 6 hours a day to 125 students, supervising the production of a nationally recognized yearbook at a rigorous college prep high school in eastern North Carolina. It was Sunday morning, and I had a stack of document-based essays to read for my AP class, and report cards were due Monday morning. Oh, that, and I'm a single mom to 2 kids, and I was caring for my disabled parents. The last thing I had was free time. But I'm a history nerd and a book geek, and being rather frugal, I'm thinking to myself, hey, it's a free book, right? Well, how bad can it be? And I don't have to read it now. So I told Mary, sure, I'll go ahead and pick it up. And maybe I'll even make a few comments. Well, as we all know, there's no such thing as a free book or a free lunch. And as Bart has quickly learned, I never make just a few comments. He emailed me the manuscript later that day, and to make a long story short, I was transfixed. I'm not giving much away when I mention that the novel opens with Tiberius's father standing in a quiet, solemn rain, the sun diffuse and colorless, as a haze drifts over the Tyrrhenian Sea, motionless. Additional descriptions of the weather and the features surrounding the senator's seaside village so much matched an experience I'd had near Pompeii, I had to ask. So when were you there? Never, he said. Never? How did you do that? I just write what feels right, he said. I didn't know what to say. The descriptions were so accurate, I felt like I had stood there on that same stone rampart. I kept reading, pulled in by the immediate intrigue. Question after question thrilled through my mind, and I couldn't put the book down. Then I started to feel a connection to the narrator, Helena. She seemed to think the way I thought, and she seemed to say the things I would say if faced with similar circumstances. And she seemed to get annoyed with the same petty things in life that I do. I immediately felt a kinship. Who was this guy? I thought to myself. This Bart Boge, or Boge, I didn't even know how to pronounce his last name. How was it then that he seemed to write in the same manner in which I talk? How did he do that? And then his character interaction. Conversations were so precise, so carefully crafted with nuance, or an unexpectedly witty comeback that they tease, but gently, in a good way. Relationships are real, not forced, and nothing is overdone or overstated. Bart gives you just enough to feel satisfied, well read, and well fed by the reading, and you want more. You'll crave it. He's like our neighborhood drug dealer, dishing out just enough of his drug in every scene to keep us, his loyal readers, blissfully happy, ignorant of how deep our addiction has gone until we try to put the book down. Good at class, grade papers, report cards due at 8 a.m., oh well, pedestrian trivialities compared to a great work of fiction. Several times that first day, I just sat back, amazed. And I said to myself, wow, just wow. And I began to wonder, does every female reader feel the same way? And then my ego took a real hit. How in the world does this guy understand the female mind so well? That's not fair. Men aren't supposed to be able to understand us. Isn't there a rule about that? At the end of the first day's read, I knew instantly that I wanted to be more involved. The book was too good to just put down on the shelf and forget about it. But how? I offered my research and editing services. Maybe not just a few generalized comments at the end, but maybe I could help a little bit more. Was I fooling? The book's great as it is. He doesn't need me. What if I offered a study guide? Something for a book club. I could offer to help market the book. For free, even. Okay, no, that just sounds desperate. Surely he's got it all mapped out. But maybe, just maybe, I could help with a small bit of something. I don't remember much else of what happened over the next 2 weeks, except that it involved a rapid consumption of the book, over 16,000 texts, and this is from someone who doesn't text, and about 60 hours of conversation about the book, plot twists and turns, characters, Roman Empire, theology, moral dilemmas, you name it. We won't tell my former principal how much time I spent on actual schoolwork, will we? I can't promise you that regarding Tiberius will change your life like it did mine, but I can promise you this. You'll come away moved. You'll start to look back on pivotal events in your own life and think about how you handled things. You'll start to think about what happens when loved ones are tragically lost. What happens when someone's world is destroyed. You begin to wonder what sows the seeds of hate. And you wonder, how do people just start over after horrific tragedy? You begin to think about what it means to dispense justice and what it means to grant mercy. And you'll begin to reflect on the power of brotherhood, the meaning of unconditional love, and the necessity of forgiveness. If you're like me, you'll finish the book, and you'll sit quietly, and you'll ask yourself, how did he do that? And then you'll say, more. I want more. How did he do that? Is there more? Well, he's going to tell us. May I present to you Mr. Bart Boge, author of the epic novel regarding Tiberius.
Well, how do you follow that? When you're an artist, you want to make a connection. That's why you do what you do. And so that the connection that Ray had with the book it's the fulfillment of everything as a writer that I could ever aspire to achieve. And I don't know how to follow that, but I have notes, so I will try. And I'm not as polished an orator as my marketing director / fiance is, but you're here and you probably won't leave, so I have the floor. I want to thank Ray for the introduction. Thank Professor Gilbert for the use of this room. And the custodians, Marilyn and Lisa, who are not here right now, who set everything up, and every one of you who came today. A word about custodians. The custodians at Lawrence have been so good to me. In fact, I think something approaching 20% of all the books that we've sold thus far have been to Lawrence custodians, believe it or not. One of whom, Judy, who used to be the custodian at Ormsby, made it her stocking stuffer this year and bought 12. So she probably will reign for a long time as our top customer, and whenever she needs anything, I will be there for her. The title that I gave to this talk, From Power Chords to Pistachio Bombs, it's kind of a way of saying this is like the making of. But I thought about it, and I don't want to talk all that much about that, or not as much as I probably would have liked to. I think the feedback I've gotten is people want to know actually more about what is in the book, without, of course, giving away spoilers or anything. So there's really two journeys that I'm going to talk about: my journey and Helena's journey. Helena is the narrator and main protagonist of my novel. Let's start with mine. Power chords. Believe it or not, this entire project was never meant to be a novel. It was never really meant to be anything other than the narrative to a progressive rock album that my band was going to be recording. We had recorded an album that was released late in 2001 that was one of these albums that met with some measure of critical acclaim and got zero traction marketing-wise. Didn't help that we released it September 1, 2001, and 10 days later, events kind of made progressive rock probably a backseat item. But the bigger problem was that no one listens to progressive rock anymore. You find very few people who want to sit down and listen to a 20 or 30-minute song. We live in the time of iPods and playlists, and I just don't want to buy the album, I just want to buy the single. So, what is a progressive rock musician to do who wants to write big works, but wants actually someone to listen to big works? So I pitched the idea to my band that the only time the average person will sit in a seat for 90 minutes and listen to one unified piece of music is a musical, right? So, or they used to call them rock operas. They're not really a rock opera if, not every line of dialogue is sung. But I prefer to just say it like an art rock musical. So I said that our next project should be a musical. So then I thought, well, to get everything kind of organized, I would write a stage play, just as a structure to write and arrange all this music from. And so I did. And being a Lawrence grad, I thought, well, the whole way I even got through Lawrence was that I was a pretty good writer, because it certainly wasn't my study habits or research skills that got me my degree. It was my ability to write, and only my ability to write, that I managed to walk that stage and shake President Warsh's hand. So, so I wrote a screenplay, or a stage play rather, and I thought, well, how bad can it be? So I hired a script doctor and learned how absolutely terrible my stage play was, and how many rules it violated, and how terrible it was. And so, I pay this person $350 to have him say in the immortal words of Tom Servo, touch a match to that stinkburger and never put pen to paper again until the mountains fall into the sea. I think that's the line. That's it. But it was good enough to move me to the next step. And my best friend, who at the time was the music director of a small church, Dan Kunde, the mountain of a man sitting back there, on his praise team was a woman who was married to a semi-retired Hollywood producer by the name of Jane Dan Nichols. Probably his biggest film was the Luther biopic. That was a fairly major release back in 2003. Well, Dan gave him a copy of this stage play and a copy of my band's previous album for context. And this guy didn't hate it as much as my script doctor did. And at least it earned me enough to have a cup of coffee with him. So I have a cup of coffee with him. And he says, well, why do you want to do this as a stage play? Do you have some great love for the stage? Or are you just doing it because it would be easy to get like some community theater group to do your project? I said, well, yeah, probably the latter, because I think in visual and kind of cinematic terms. He said, well, why don't you write it as a screenplay? It's not that hard to get a movie funded. Well, this is this guy's a producer who's done it before. But I thought, oh, okay. So I spent the next couple of years converting the stage play into a screenplay. And then I took it to another script doctor who told me, same thing the last one did. Your screenplay straight up sucks. It's on life support. There are some elements of the story that are good, but you should not be writing screenplays. No. But at this point, I had given up on this whole angle of writing the narrative, because I figured I've got this screenplay. Even though it's terrible, I have all my characters in place. I have the plot in place. I'm going to just do the music. The original point of this was to record an album. Well, then I tried to record with the computer I had, which was old as the hills, and could not keep up with the track count, could not perform, and I needed a computer upgrade for my studio, my home project studio. And it was going to be a really tough sell to get my wife at the time to agree to like a $3,000 upgrade to a studio for music that's never really produced a penny of income for our family, which in a sense you can't hardly blame her for that. Well, then my friend Dan comes up with this glorious plan. He says, you've got the story. Why don't you write a little novella, put it on Amazon, and then you can use the proceeds to pay for your studio upgrades. Well, as you'll see, for those of you who purchased the book and see the acknowledgments in the back, I don't know whether to thank Dan for that or sock him in the gut. Because the 100 or 120 page novella turned into a 600 page behemoth. But I can't really blame him completely about that, because the project took on a life of its own. And if you're a writer or a sculptor or a painter, or you're involved in any kind of creative endeavor, sometimes you're in control and sometimes you aren't. Sometimes the project says, no, this is what you're going to do. This is what you have to do next. It's kind of funny. Stephen King uses the metaphor that writing a novel is more like paleontology, in that you're just removing the dirt and digging up the big dinosaur fossil. You're not in as much control as you think you are. You're not writing the story. You're just unearthing it and exposing it to the public. I like that metaphor, because that certainly seemed to be the case with this thing. So, let me see, I'll deviate a little from my notes. Something happened now on the way to writing a novel. It turns out I don't suck as a novelist. And the process of writing a piece of historical fiction is a little different than one might expect, or maybe not. You write a page, and then you spend 45 minutes doing research to see if what you wrote was remotely plausible, and throwing it away and starting over if it wasn't. But it got better. And often the historical insights that would debunk what I'd written created a new path to something even better than what I had originally imagined, and it was more historically accurate. So I'm a serviceable novelist, I think. I wouldn't say it's great, and certainly when you talk to writers, even writers that are very successful, they're all a very melancholy bunch, introspective, melancholy bunch, who are certain that the next book will be the one that just derails their career, and are in more or less constant need of reassurance from a public or a publicist or anyone else that their stuff isn't complete rubbish. So at this point, should explain the second half of the title of this talk, in case you're wondering. It says, from power chords, which you assume you get as me as a progressive rock musician, to pistachio bombs. There is an anecdote in a sequence in regarding Tiberius in which a lone woman single-handedly destroys 3 Roman warships using nothing more than a few terracotta jars, some quicklime, some naphtha, and hulled pistachio meats in an ancient world version of a delayed detonation IED. So I ran the concept past a few LU physics students who said the design was at least plausible, which is more than sufficient for a writer. In fact, one of the guys I ran it past, Jonah, he was here before all of you got here, bought a book and left, but he was one of the guys that I ran this whole thing past to make sure that, because I didn't take physics in college. I didn't know if what I was doing was going to really be plausible. And now the Mythbusters is done, they're not going to be around to try to debunk my story. But if you want to know more about the pistachio bombs thing, you're gonna have to read the book. But that's my journey. That's how I got from progressive rock musician doing a concept album to 600-page novel. Now let's talk about the book itself. Let's start with the title, Regarding Tiberius. And in case you haven't already guessed it, I intend both meanings for the word regarding. Regarding as in concerning, having to do with, and regarding as in to look upon. In the beginning and the ending of the book, they're tied together by that word, regarding. The account is about or concerning this character, Tiberius, and the intended recipient of the account is beholding Tiberius's corpse. This is no spoiler in that Tiberius' lifeless corpse is presented to us in the very beginning, in the prologue. There's no question as to his decease, but many, many questions about how and why he perished. Now let's look at the cited author, Helena Mithridates Cleopatra, and this has caused some consternation. People are wondering if I even wrote the book, because I put this name on there. And that's an odd pen name for a hardy, flannel-wearing, German heritage Wisconsin man like me to use. It's odd, but I think totally appropriate. My narrator, Helena, is a tall, lanky, athletic, dark-complected woman of Persian and Ethiopian ancestry. She was born into a royal family that drew its bloodlines from both the Persian king Darius the Great and the Macedonian warrior Alexander the Great. My vision is just killing me here. Born to wealth and privilege, she's a polyglot who reads, writes, and speaks several languages. She's also classically educated, having been tutored by the great historian and geographer Strabo. But she's no mere academic. Being groomed for leadership as the only heir to her family's throne, Helena decided early in life that she would have to know about the arts of war to be a competent head of state. She underwent military training with her father's security forces, and 4 young men were assigned to her to be her personal bodyguard detail, whom she refers to as her brothers, quote unquote. One of the ways Helena tries to experience the stresses of combat is through hunting expeditions. On one particular occasion, she and her brothers encounter a Caspian tiger, which is a now extinct species of tiger akin to a Siberian tiger, as large as a Siberian tiger, larger than a Bengal tiger. The group see it stalking 2 shepherd boys in a meadow. Helena, against the protestations of her companions, lets an arrow loose to kill, injure, or at least shoo off the tiger before it pounces. She hits it, but the creature sees her. It advances towards her. Here, voiced by Ray, where's Ray? Is Helena's count of what happened next.
It looked large enough from a distance. By the time it was 20 paces away from me, it was massive, with nothing but mere empty space between me and the creature. I'd never felt more exposed or helpless before in my life. My hands trembled, and nervous sweat stung my eyes. But I held my ground, Gladius at the ready, not moving, not giving away my brothers with a telling glance. The creature stopped 10 paces away and began to coil back on its haunches for what would likely be the last time it would ever thrust itself ahead in attack. It was close enough now for me to close the trap. "Now!" I screamed. My brave brothers sprang from their concealment, and 4 pilas sailed into the big cat's chest, 2 from the left and 2 from the right. It happened so quickly and precisely that the tiger took little note of its new attackers, still focused upon me. Its legs buckled, and it looked as though it might be finished. But with one defiant heave of effort, it sprang at me. My brothers, fully panicked, were running to my position, gladii drawn to protect me, but they would be too late to spare me from its fury. The beast flew at me. It had decided not to cuff me with its forepaws, as cats often do when threatening an adversary, rather using its last reserve of strength to deliver a vengeful death bite, leading with its head. By instinct, I followed my training from months of sparring with my brothers. I had just a second to feign to my right, just enough to get the beast's head to commit to that direction, and then step quickly to the left, uncoiling my best swing directly into the creature's jaws. The bite missed me, but it was close enough for my face to brush past its open maw, its whiskers dragging across my face. Near enough for me to feel the monster's hot breath on my shoulder as I bypassed its attack. But a fraction of a second later, I was cast like a rag doll, a full 10 paces away. I looked back. My gladius was wedged deeply into the back of the tiger's mouth, its efforts to chew or use its tongue to dislodge the blade only injuring it further. And just then, my brothers arrived and formed a wall between me and the great cat, gladii drawn. But my brave bodyguards would not have to test their courage any further. It was finished. Unable to dislodge my gladius and still dragging 4 pilae and an arrow in its chest, the mighty beast finally succumbed to its injuries and slumped to the ground. The life was gone from its fierce eyes, and the labored heaves of its breathing had ceased with a final exhalation. For the longest moment, no one moved or said anything. We all wanted to be absolutely sure the tiger had indeed expired. Then, cautiously, I rose to my feet and drew my first breath of relief. Only then did the sharp pain on the right side of my rib cage remind me of the blow I had just taken. As I moved to the left and swung my blade, trying to avoid the crushing jaws, the grip of the monster's right forepaw, I lunged directly into the range of his left one. That swift and powerful swat of that vicious left paw landed directly on my right side, throwing me clear of him. And that violent blow had broken at least a few ribs, and 4 of the creature's claws had raked across my stomach. Fortunately for me, the tiger's strength had been largely drained before its paws swiped me, and the light leather armor I wore protected me from being mortally wounded by the claws. Still, 4 crimson ribbons of blood now seeped through the armor.